sizes of interest. One of the topics I'll just bring up the one that's foremost in my mind right now. And a seemingly ongoing problem is when you have a family and they're supposed to go to grandma's house, to my mother-in-law's house, but wait, we want to stay home and do it ourselves. And consequently, feelings can get hurt, and people are going to multiple Thanksgiving dinners and nobody's hungry. And so grandma's upset. And why can't we figure this out? And this has probably been going on since, I don't know, maybe in the 50s. Before that, people couldn't get around, so they all lived close together and it all worked out. But it's not working out anymore like it used to. So I want to open that up to any ways of coping with this between all of us. And anybody want to address it first?
Well, I know for me personally, this is an issue just within our family with, all my siblings, my nieces and nephews. If we were all together, the house would bust open. And so when we were all little, of course, everyone was together because, we were all at my mom's house. But my nieces and nephews have their own lives, their own families now. So part of what we have just personally tried to do is have communications ahead of time. As far as, we're going to take turns hosting, who's going to come. If some other day other than the actual day of Thanksgiving works better, perhaps having it just simply a different day for our family so that it's not as stressful for everyone. So part of that is just having that discussion up front. And I think sometimes particular families that have young children really need to look at what is in the best interest of their nuclear family at that moment. Because with children, it's very hard to go to multiple households in one day. No one's enjoying themselves because you breeze in and have some turkey and then you run back out to go to the next house and grandma is upset because you've left. The next grandma's upset because you don't eat. So it's having that discussion up front as to what it is we as a family want to do, what's best for us, and then communicating that.
Yeah, I agree with that getting it kind of ironed out beforehand seems like the most adult and stress combative way to deal with it. However, who is going to be that initiator? Who will be the initiator to coordinate the family and all the offshoots of the family to get this going? And that, I think, is part of the problem, because we all know that sometimes the messenger is going to get cremated, right?
Right.
So, any suggestions, therapist? What do you think?
That was first mentioned, when this first got brought up a few minutes ago, the first thing that came to my mind was at some point, somebody in the family has to be able to confront this feeling of obligation, because that's kind of what's at the core of this. I have to go to every different separate celebration. We have to show up at every holiday gathering, and particularly now, this could happen at other holidays too. I could see this being a problem with some of the summer holidays maybe, but especially, between now and New Year's Day. So the first step maybe is just recognizing that part of this is coming from a feeling of I have to do this versus I think it's the best thing or we actually want to. Start with that. A lot of good things can happen.
Right. Absolutely.
What are the thoughts about, because one of the challenges related to that obligation is also the feeling of I'm missing out and I feel guilty if I don't do all these things. How do you suggest people kind of deal with those feelings of guilt and responsibility and obligation?
Do you need to be, and I thought about this a lot when thinking about what to talk about today, but we do need to remember to be realistic now, maybe more than ever, because even if you can get around and I can get in my car and make it to every holiday gathering, doesn't mean it's going to be a positive experience to run ourselves that dry just because it's possible. So I think recognizing that we don't always have to push every limit to the brink of what we can do, maybe it makes more sense to try to make the most out of what can easily be done versus what can possibly theoretically technically be done.
Well, and I think too that we focus so much on Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day that we forget that the holidays can be celebrated anytime. That, you know, maybe we wait until January 18th and then everyone gets together. You know, I have a dear friend who has 3 adult children who are all married and they all have kids and they don't always make it for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So they find one time during the year that they can all be together. Literally one year they all went to Florida like in March and they put up a Christmas tree in the little condo that they were staying in, right? And they celebrated that togetherness time. It's not just that magical date of, you know, of January, December 25th. It's let's make family more so than just those 2 days.
Right. Right. I think one of the solutions maybe for people who don't have resources to get together is to start a dialogue beforehand, talking about what were some of the favorite things that we ate when we went to grandma's. Liz used to bring the cheese straws and Becky brought the dressing, and, you know, and we can rekindle, maybe we can't rekindle being together, but what we can rekindle is the feeling of when we were together and what that was about. And also maybe as a follow-up, maybe, you know, that cheese straw recipe can be sent to everybody. And a way for us to be together is we all make cheese straws for Thanksgiving because we loved them all so much. And that's, you know, a way to keep that bond together and figure out ways, like you said before, times we can get together and you know, have a Christmas tree in March or whatever. And when you do have that Thanksgiving Day, and it can't be with everybody you want it to be with, find a way to make it meaningful. I was in a meeting this morning with some women and we talked about inviting somebody who doesn't have any place else to go.
Right.
You know, maybe there's a neighbor who lives alone. And that way you can feel better about the thanks and the giving part of Thanksgiving. So I'm kind of focusing on Thanksgiving right now because that's what's going to happen. So I think it's important for us to look for solutions. We have to identify the problem, certainly, but let's look for solutions.
Mm-hmm. I think part of it too is looking at, for example, if I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year, that I can make a point to reach out to those folks that maybe have multiple obligations and say, I know this is hard. I get it. You're not going to make it to everybody's house, and kind of let them off the hook a little bit.
Absolutely. Oh,
because if we're the ones making the guilt trip, then we're the ones who can let them off the hook for it, to say, you know, this is hard and I will miss you if you're not here, but we want you to enjoy your holiday. So come next weekend and we'll spend some time together.
What's the,
I'm going to jump in
ahead,
and
Josh.
interrupt because we have a question. The question is, the first one is, a family member and I always get in a fight due to politics. Help. And I assume it's just, you know, these moments of conflict where you know this person believes one way and you believe the other way, and or something happened and there's a moment of conflict. Like, what's a good way to handle that going into the holidays?
Anybody want to touch that one?
Politics. Don't talk about politics at Thanksgiving. Somebody's going to sling the turkey leg at you. How do we deal with it?
I think part of it is if you always get into that argument, then the argument itself is almost part of the family tradition. You know, so let's change the tradition. And so you disagree, you're half of the argument. So it's either sit and listen with an open mind or just simply say, you know what, this is something we do every year. How about this year? Let's focus on something that we do agree on. Like just call it out. Like why have the argument when you're half of it? So find something.
I would also recommend redirecting the conversation. So if they want to talk about politics, redirect them to their personal life or to their job or to other things that they can also easily talk about to get away from the hot topics.
And if somebody can be really tactful, if they can communicate that before Thanksgiving, before the holiday, that we want this to be a wonderful thing for everybody, and you know, everybody's opinion should be respected, but we all know it's a hot topic. So let's make Thanksgiving about giving thanks and giving, not about who, you know, if we're on the blue side or the red side.
This is always, I mean, the potential for this to be an issue at family gatherings is never going to stop. You know, I know it could happen at any time, but particularly if it's a family member you don't necessarily see all that often and your relationship is typically confined to big gatherings, that
Right.
person, any of us, could maybe be waiting all year, you know, subconsciously or partially to just have that fight, you know, that annual argument that we have with that person. So I think being aware of it like you are right now and recognizing that's a thing that's happened way too many times at this point, I'm sure, is a big step, because the last thing we want is for that to sneak up on us if we're having a good holiday and then all of a sudden the fight just comes back out of nowhere.
Well, what about the folks that are not the hosts and how they can manage? Because, you know, a host can kind of set the tone of these gatherings, but what about the attendees who go, oh my gosh, I have to go to Aunt Rosemary's and Uncle Johnny's going to be there. What are your suggestions for those people who can't really set the tone of the gathering?
I think they can, in a way, I mean, I use humor a lot to say, I'm just telling you all, we're not having this discussion this year. We're talking about the Green Bay Packers. Like, I don't care, you know, whatever topic we're going to come up with, but it's something that's innocuous, and just kind of throw it out there. This happens every year. I appreciate you both. I love you both. Can we please not do that this year?
I strategically set up buffers, social buffers. I had a very unpleasant holiday where I got stuck. I got literally cornered at a table in just a very unpleasant conversation for over an hour because I couldn't get away. And, you know, it's just like the people who are there, you know, it's just like, you know, be watchful about the social communication and the interaction going on in a group. And you know, if you can swing in there, if, you know, somebody's looking like they're a little kind of downtrodden because they're just having too much, you know, redirect it or ask somebody to, you know, oh, can you come help me in the kitchen, or do things just to kind of break the social dynamics that are going up in the room.
Right.
Time limits are also important. I think sometimes at these family gatherings, there's oh, well, you know, Thanksgiving is served exactly at 1 p.m., but everybody has to stay till 8 p.m. or something. Right? So whatever. And so how do you think you can politely work with family around, this is how much time I think I can stand everybody?
Yeah, I think again, it's having that conversation and being bold. You know, as hard as that is to say, you know, with where I'm at right now in my life, I don't know that 8 o'clock is going to work for me. You know, I just think it's healthier for me. Again, have that conversation in advance. I realize everyone plays cards after dinner, or whatever it is they do. It's always penny ante poker at my childhood home. But maybe that's not the best for us. You know, maybe this year I need to do something different.
I think one suggestion that I've found that has worked with my family, who are hard drinking Irish Catholic folks, that you know, it can get volatile at times, is one thing that seemed to have diffused us is early on, you have everybody kind of get together with a piece of paper and talk about what they're thankful for. what they want to do differently in the next year. And then as you gather in a group, everybody's sharing their very appropriate thoughts, hopefully, of what, and I think that can really calm a crowd down if you talk about being thankful and maybe what you appreciate about somebody, or a change you want to make in your own life. That kind of keeps the volatility from seeping in. And people kind of don't want to do that in the beginning. Oh, no, that's corny. I don't want to do that. I don't have anything to say. But I think when people start talking, then the other folks will join in and say their 2 cents. And it makes it a much more positive experience.
All right.
We have
You guys are doing great. This has been awesome. Even just listening to it as a probation officer, it's been really helpful. And I think we're going to put this on our website. I think it's going to be something that everybody can access. But we have another question. How do I handle it if I'm not invited to a family event? And with our clientele, this is something that happens either by, force because they got an order from the court that says they can't do it, or, they've burnt some bridges along the way. So if you guys can maybe come up with some answers for that question, that'd be great. So how do I handle it if I'm not invited to a family event?
So if I'm not invited to Thanksgiving, obviously my feelings are hurt. And how do I cope with it? Is that what you're saying? Is that the question?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. What do you all think?
I think part of it is following through with those wishes and not showing up, because some folks would want to take that upon them and go ahead and come. Have someone to process that with. Do you have a trusted person that you can kind of talk through those hard feelings and that hurt with? Because if not, then that just adds to what you are already dealing with. So just have that person, and then make plans for yourself that are positive. If you don't have a place to go as far as other friends and family, go someplace and serve. There's different community events where dinners are hosted, and so go to one of those places and serve, and then maybe eat with the other volunteers and just start something new in your life.
Right. And there are dinners I know around here in Spencer where they'll just have dinners and you can go and have Thanksgiving at certain churches and community centers and stuff like that. And it's a place to, you might walk in the door feeling real bummed out, but then if, as you engage with other people, obviously, you won't be as solitary and unincluded. You'll find a place for inclusion. Right.
What about one of the other things that happens with holidays and family gatherings is this reminder of difficult times and loved ones who are no longer with us.
Right.
So what are some ways that these individuals or families can celebrate while honoring those that they cared about who are not with the family?
Yes.
I think for a lot of people who are going through grief during the holidays, whether it be because of what you referenced there, loss and just dealing with, being in that time of year without that loved one, it makes a lot of sense to try to keep at least a little bit of conscious thought about that person around that time. Because if you're not consciously thinking about them, there's going to be a part of you somewhere down the line during that holiday that thinks about them anyway. And if it's coming up in ways that are not conducive to us, processing through the loss or remembering them or having something to tie us back to that loved one, I think the likelihood of it being, traumatic even, or at the very least, very depressing, and very sad and very difficult to work through, goes way up if we're intentional with how we think about that person and we allow ourselves to accept that grief and feel it. At least then we can own it. Then we can make it something that we can benefit from almost, because we can remember that person in the way we want to.
And I think another thing is, what better place? You all kind of knew Uncle Harry. What better place to hold each other and cry together and talk about the memories and joke about his idiosyncrasies. And, you know, because, you know, when you talk to a stranger about it, they didn't know your Uncle Harry. But I just see that as a great way to keep a family strong. We all live this life experience together.
Mhm. Well, and two, it's really hard when we have a loss because our family traditions now change.
Mhm.
Because even doing, again, maybe you play cards after dinner and Uncle Harry was very competitive. And so that dynamic maybe is gone. And so it's, how do you maintain, or do you even want to maintain that same tradition? Or would you like to start a new family tradition that celebrates Uncle Harry in a different way, or celebrates the family in a different way? I think that we get locked into those family traditions and don't want to give them up. But sometimes as the family grows and changes, our traditions have to grow and change as well.
Building new memories.
Mm-hmm. And
What
I think,
about honoring, sorry,
well, sorry,
Yeah.
Tony, one of the things that I think about too real quick is that so many people think about that year of firsts, right? We have the first birthday for Uncle Harry, and the first Christmas, the first Thanksgiving, and all of those firsts, but it doesn't make the second any easier either. And so it's understanding that that second Thanksgiving or Christmas or birthday without him may be just as hard, and giving ourselves a break for that.
And to your point about new traditions, if anyone's hesitant with that and feels like that's dishonoring the deceased, or if that's, you know, minimizing that loss, it's not. It's you're just responding to a legitimate pain, you know, and we have to respond to that somehow. New traditions does not erase everything that happened before, and it doesn't decrease the love you have for that person. It's just you being able to move forward.
Right.
there's
like-
a,
Go ahead.
there's a question that came up, and it was about how to handle people coming to family gatherings with maybe choices that aren't helpful or bad behavior, such as over drinking or bringing drama, or bringing someone that the family doesn't approve of. Or how do you suggest handling those kinds of moments?
That's a
Yeah.
tough one. That's a tough one.
That's
Well,
a tough one.
I think part of it, now, if you know those things in advance,
Right.
part of it is marshaling our own responses to those things. Because if someone in the family traditionally starts drama, if we buy into that drama, then all we're doing is helping. And so if the individuals around them choose not to buy into that and choose not to engage in that, it's going to help minimize it, because, you know, it takes two to be involved in that. And so it's minimizing the response to that. It's maybe if someone typically overdrinks, maybe we choose not to have alcohol at the family event that year. And others may balk at that, but you know, if it helps that family be healthy, choosing not to have the alcohol there might be, you know, might be a better choice for you guys.
Mhm. Right. And I think another thing is, if you can head it off at the pass beforehand and address that, you know, it's, you don't have a guarantee that people are going to comply, but if Sister Sally drinks too much every time you get together, you pull her aside and try to very humanely, kindly, but directly address her drinking and how that affects everybody else. And you know, there's no guarantees with that. But again, I think you're right, Missy. Those of us who don't want to have to deal with that, we can react in a more healthy way to the drinking. And that's a big problem, I think. And I mean, it certainly is in my family. I don't know about you all, but yeah, we got some drinkers, and boy, woo, but you know, in a way, we just kind of have known this, and we have this inner way of dealing with that, which, you know, we can't forget. You know, we've been with these people all our lives, and so you cope with it. But yeah,
Well, but that speaks to the people that we haven't known all our lives as well. So dealing with the behavior of people that others in the family have brought to the gathering and their bad behaviors.
the newcomers, right?
Yeah. How do you handle the newcomers?
Okay, stump the therapist.
Sounds like more of a feeling out process with that one. If it's a newcomer that's a brand newcomer, you know, maybe it's not their second holiday, but somebody that's totally new. You know, some of their potential bad behaviors or strangeness or any quirks maybe might be out of nervousness. You know, it could be anxiety on their part. It could be a lack of comfort in a new situation. So being conscientious about what kind of atmosphere we set for a newcomer, if we're not one of the newcomers, is really, really good to keep in mind, because there's a pretty good chance that maybe you've been the newcomer at someone else's family gathering before, or you will be at some point in the future. And anyone who's been in that situation can relate. It can be kind of strange. You know, it's kind of hard to feel like yourself sometimes when you're surrounded by a bunch of people who've known each other for a long time and you've only known one of them.
Well, and also we don't know what their family traditions are like. You know, maybe we have a more subdued, quiet family, and maybe they are a very, you know, very verbose family, and they get very animated. And so to us, that might be obnoxious, but that's just who they are as a family. It's kind of recognizing that they come from their own traditions, their own backgrounds. If you mix that with, like Jason was talking about, potentially being uncomfortable, and that could make for, you know, an interesting day.
Yeah, one of the things that I wonder about also is how to invite family members who maybe haven't had great choices at past family gatherings and newcomers into activities together. So what are some activities that you suggest families have? Because eating is part of it. Food tends to bring people together. But what other activities might be reasonable for people to plan for these gatherings?
Well,
I think
go ahead, Missy.
Well, I just think for holidays, particularly if you got, you know, the Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's always sports on TV and football. And so there might be some people who really much like to watch those football games and other people who don't. So I think it's looking at, do we have activities that absolutely every person has to be involved in? Or can you have multiple rooms with multiple things going on, particularly with big families? You know, you might have multiple things going on at one time, because maybe there is a group that wants to go watch the football game, but another group that would rather stick a hot needle in their eye. So, you know, it's having multiple activities going that those folks can choose what they engage in.
Yeah, you know, you've got Tammy in the kitchen cleaning out the turkey roaster, and you've got the kids outside playing kickball, and Mary and Uncle Bill are in watching football, and somebody else is over playing cards, and that's okay. You know, that's okay if there's multiple things going on. You know, you don't have to all be Velcro to each other during this time. So, and that's part of it. And that can also be a part of your memories. Oh yeah, Tammy was always cleaning out the turkey roaster, you know, so.
Yeah.
Which is so true, by the way.
We don't want it to be, you know, forced. Like if someone feels a holiday tradition or an activity is forced, especially forced upon them, not just inauthentic, but, you know, you have to do this, you have no choice. It's very, very hard for that to be anything other than a negative experience. And you know, like was just mentioned there with, you know, having memories of one person always has this role and someone else is more likely to be in this activity. Well, we don't want those memories to be, I was forced to do this every year. And if you do have memories of that in your own holiday traditions, seems like that's something to try to change, especially if you're, you know, taking a more active role as you become an adult, and maybe you get to set the stage a little bit for what those holidays look like. Not repeating those things from the past, if that's something you remember, would be awesome to do.
Right.
There's a segue. There was a question asked, which is somewhat related, but not entirely. And it's, we always go to my in-laws for the holiday. How do I get out of it?
Again, I think part of that's having a discussion that starts way before the holiday. Like, this is how I'm feeling. And so just being upfront and honest, but at the same time, not critical of the spouse's family, but just, you know, honestly, this is something like, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I would like to do instead. Like, do you feel like it's something we can accommodate?
And there's no golden rule that says you arrive in one car and you leave in one car. I mean,
Ooh, yeah.
and actually, I think that's better for family dynamics. So nobody feels snubbed or ignored or whatever. You go for part of the meal when everybody's busy eating and eating. And then you can leave a little bit earlier or a lot earlier than your spouse does.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with going to 4 or 5 places. I mean, that sounds like horrible to me, but some people, you know, it's, you can look on it as what were those meals they used to have? You know, you'd go one place for the appetizer and
Oh, right.
The
what were
progressive
those
dinner.
called? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't even,
They're called progressive dinner.
I didn't understand, but yeah.
progressive dinners.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so, you know, there's Thanksgiving and Christmas can be whatever you make it, and it can be individual to, you know, so many families. You know, as we keep talking about this, I kind of wonder about our topics and the things we've come up with, how they apply with our clients. Most of who don't have many resources, most who have a lot of trauma going on, or, you know, bad things happening in their lives and a lot of drama, and are we leaving anything out about the folks we see face to face? When, how do they, is there something special that they have to deal with during the holidays that we haven't mentioned? I know that's a hard question because we don't have these holidays with our clients, right? I mean, but what are some of their challenges? Certainly I can think of money. I don't have enough money to buy a turkey. Wait a minute, come to think of it, I don't have a stove. So I can't even cook a turkey.
But also it not just not having things, but also recognizing that maybe I have some emotional or consequential things, like, geez, I'm on probation and people are going to judge me, or I have depression and people are going to ask me questions and I don't want to answer those. What suggestions do you have for those folks?
Yeah, I like the one about being on probation, because you come in and, oh, there's Uncle Harry and he's on probation. He's got an ankle bracelet on, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think part of it's always having an ally in the room. Having that, you know, having someone who has your back, who understands kind of what you're going through. And so maybe you're reaching out to, maybe you have a sibling or a cousin or someone who's coming to that holiday who's supportive of you, and being with them for part of it, and having them kind of, if they see you start to get nervous, to kind of give you that support that you need, so that you've got someone in the room who has an understanding of what you're going through at that moment. I think that's important too. When some of our folks, when they go to holidays, they may be facing past perpetrators.
Oh,
And so,
Very good, Missy.
yeah, so that can be incredibly traumatic. It's either I have to miss my entire family on the holiday, or I have to face this person. And so that can be an incredibly hard decision to make about either going or not going.
Right. And sometimes we're dealing with ex-spouses, the ex-spouse
Mhm.
comes and, maybe you all are reconciled and it's not an issue anymore, but sometimes it's, you're still raw from that experience. So dealing with the ex-spouse, right, or someone who's wronged you in the past. Yeah. How do we do that? What do we do?
In these family dynamic areas, I think, one thing to try to be patient with yourself on, if this does come up, is to recognize that the pressure does turn up around this time of year. The pressure to perform, to put on a show. Sometimes people feel like they're acting around the holidays, and you may actually be doing that all year. So when it comes to seeing exes or perpetrators, and if you have to deal with that at other times of year, you're giving yourself a chance to prepare for maybe the spotlight of the holidays that comes around annually. We know it's going to happen. It's kind of hard to remember or think about that in May. We're not really thinking about November and December all that much. We're just trying to get through it. But every time that you manage to confront these things, and every time you manage to deal with triggers like this, you are getting better at it.
Yeah.
It's understandable that if it feels a little bit harder this time of year.
What tools do you recommend people kind of put in their arsenal for that? If I'm the person walking into that, what are some things that I can do to kind of armor myself?
Well, in addition to what Missy mentioned with having an ally, that's huge, especially if you have somebody that warrants it. If somebody really, really seems like someone you can trust, and you want to give that trust to them, that's an awesome recommendation. I also think being okay, like Elena mentioned, being okay with an exit strategy. We talked about obligation early on, just feeling obligated to go to every gathering and be there and be present and stick around. Same thing with this. If you need to give yourself a break and you need to get out of a room for a little bit, even if it's just for a few minutes, we need to be able to do that sometimes, because if we don't exit the situation, it's very possible for that pressure to be a little bit too much to handle at that time.
Mhm.
And maybe one of the things you can do is, when you're there, you can help the host. You can make yourself useful and offer to set the table, or take the kids outside and do something with them, unless you're a perpetrator. And then people can see another side of you if that's genuine or that's the way you want to be. If somebody's really brave, take somebody aside that there's a conflict with, and try to, well, maybe that could be good or bad, right? It could end up backfiring on you. Scratch that. Don't do that.
But again, Maureen, that could be a pre-holiday conversation.
Sure.
Just like the question earlier about, arguing about politics.
Uh-huh.
We had that conversation in advance to say, there's been some past tension between us, and we need to either settle this or find a way to table it when we're there for the holidays.
Right. Yeah. I love that. And just saying the words, I want this to be stress-free. And if you and I can come to some agreement on resolving it or not dealing with it, that's going to make it much better for the rest of the family, because they're on pins and needles seeing what the reaction is that the two of us are together.
Right.
Good idea.
Oftentimes some of these gatherings, there are people that we only ever see at these gatherings, and there's a reason for that. I only talk to you when I'm obligated to do so. And so there isn't a lot of depth in in some relationships, but there's still tension. Do you have the same recommendation for those folks, or do you have different recommendations?
Well, I think, especially if it's a family and you've known each other all your lives kind of thing. If you can talk about the good memories between you two and life got in our way and I really screwed up, or try to reframe it in a way that is less combative and, take responsibility for your part or something. And all of these things, we are coming up with some really good solutions. And the thing that we have to remember is that we try to teach people communication skills. And we understand communication skills and ways to present ourselves and to talk to people so that they'll be open to what we have to say. So many people in our world are not good communicators. They kind of what we're saying to them would be really hard to do and really foreign. Well, that just promoting communication that's appropriate and teaching. Oh my God, we have to teach people how to communicate with each other. I think that's a huge part of our job. So we have great solutions.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking
Getting
too.
people to buy into it.
Right. And the people that, you have conflict with in the family or otherwise, chances are they probably know that, for the most part, if you're feeling it, I'm guessing they're feeling it or have felt it before too. They might not be, attending these sorts of discussions and trying to make an effort to learn how to deal with them. So the fact that we're talking to people right now who have taken some initiative with that and are interested in developing skills in those areas says a lot. You may be the one who needs to initiate this conversation with your family member. They may be less likely to do that than you are, at least at this point.
Which brings the question, though, we know maybe one of the reasons that we don't communicate with this person is because in our past attempts, they've not been really receptive, and maybe it's made things worse.
Well, part of it too is, sticking with those I statements about, how, I feel there's a lot of tension between us because we can't seem to get along without arguing. I would really like to find a way for us to get along. Like if you are using those positive communication skills and that other person doesn't reciprocate, you've done what you can do. You've done your part in reaching out to say, let's do something different. And if the other person isn't in agreement with that, maybe they're just not ready for that, or they don't have the same skill level, or they're just a grumpy person. Part of it is accepting this may just never be a perfect relationship. And I did what I need to do. And so at this point, I'm not buying your part of it. I'm just going to walk away and go talk to somebody else.
Which means that some of those relationships are just never going to be repaired. And so there's always going to be those pins and needles in some families. Any suggestions about how to help families deal with those pins and needles?
I'm all for calling out the elephant in the living room. Again, having that, like, if you're going to host this, Tammy, then, I might call you in advance and say, that Jason and I never get along. I've attempted to talk to him. I just want to let you know that I'm going to do my part. Is there something that you could see that I could do different? It's having that conversation. And again, that's so hard, but it's a bold thing to step out and kind of call out what it is. We're not getting along. Is it me? Is it you? Is it somewhere in between? Do we have a misunderstanding that neither of us really understand? and try that communication over and over. Or maybe it's time to write it off and just help the family understand that we're just never going to be best friends. Oh,
Writing it
Vicky,
off as defeat or, like I failed, but, we're talking about other people. People are pretty complicated, and if we're going to have conflict with anybody, it's very, very feasible that it might be someone in our family. It might not be some random person who's not a real presence in our life. If we have conflict, it's going to be someone we have some level of connection to, whether it's friend, former friend, coworker, family, or what. So just kind of remembering that it's not necessarily a fault-based thing. Sometimes it's just not going to click, and that's fine. We can still make other things work.
So one of the things too is sometimes there's people come together not for themselves, but they do it for their kids. Like, oh, I want my kids to have a good relationship with their cousins and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles, but I can't stand the family.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some recommendations that you have for folks about how to maintain positive relationships with the children while coping with relationships that are never going to be repaired?
Well, I think it's a good idea to expose your children to experience situations where there's cousinhood. I know for me, my cousinhood, being with my cousins, was a great joy in my life. And if you like these other kids that are your kids' cousins, yeah, you want to expose them to it. So you just suck it up. Suck it up and let your kids develop their cousin relationship. It can be valuable.
Because you might see some of that tension with the parent boil away a little when there's a better relationship with their children. When they see that they can trust you with their children, you might see that relationship relax a little bit.
That's true. Yeah, I like that.
So one of the things looking forward, because this is kind of holiday season instead of holiday, a singular event. One of the things that comes up, I think sometimes is, oh my gosh, we're going to, and whatever everybody's winter holiday is, whether it's, Kwanzaa or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever, reciprocation in hosting events, or reciprocation in gifts, or reciprocation in all sorts of things, food. How do you deal with that question mark? Because that comes up a lot. Like, gosh, should I get great Uncle Johnny something? Because I know he's showing up, but I don't even really know him. Or what thoughts do you have about handling that the question of reciprocation?
Well, I think for some people, it's like, oh my God, there's 20 people in my family, and they all seem to give a present to everyone. And there is no way in hell that I can buy gifts for 20 people, especially if I think about my clients that don't have the resources to do that. And besides, right now, but we're having a problem with supply and demand. So even if you want to go get presents, they're not on the shelves, or you can't even order them anymore. So I think that can be a real stressful time for people that, oh my God, it's going to take me forever to A, buy all these presents, even if I do have the money, and B, if I don't have the money, what am I going to do? So I think that's huge stress right there.
Well, if we go back to what Jason was talking about earlier with obligation and the idea of obligation to buy great Uncle Harry something when you see him once a year, it's identifying our own sense of feeling obligated to that. I'm quite certain that Uncle Harry doesn't care whether you get him a gift or not. And so we've had a pretty, like in my family, we had a pretty open discussion that as, you know, grandchildren and now great grandchildren are coming along, it's getting harder and harder to buy for everyone. I don't know my great nieces and nephews because I see them once a year. And so we, like, as siblings, like we just said, we're not going to buy for each other. We're only going to buy for like the great grandchildren at this point, because even my nieces and nephews are adults. So it really gets to having that conversation again, that why don't we draw names so that all the kids draw names, and so you only buy for one kid, and all the adults draw names so that you only buy for one adult, so you can more focus your resources on those kind of things. Or just choose just your immediate folks that you actually want to buy for.
And again, who is the one that's going to organize all this? Who is the organizer in the family?
Mhm.
And who is the tactful organizer, right? Yeah.
And what you might find too is if one person steps out and says, let me just be straight up honest, I can't afford to buy for 20 people. You might find more people in the family who breathe a sigh of relief because they may be feeling that same sense of obligation.
So true. What about, because I think there's also this feeling of I want to create something special for everybody. Or when I go, I want people to feel like they're special and important to me without necessarily the obligation of a gift or so forth. What are any thoughts about how people can create that dynamic without the expense? Nope. What do we do? I don't know. That's a good one.
We just got to take a minute to wrap our brain around that, Tammy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be a slow transition, especially if if your family has historically expected, especially the kids, but even adults, expected there to be the exchange of gifts, a lot of gifts from
Right.
every one person to every other person. The web can get pretty big, like we were saying. So the first year that maybe you make a little bit of a change, or maybe even the first few years, it might feel kind of strange and people might not like it that much, but at some point it becomes a new tradition. Traditions never start out as traditions, they become traditions. So we do have the power to make some change there. It just might not be an instant change.
Right. And I have a friend who's a really great letter writer. And so a lot of times as a gift, she will write a letter to somebody, but in that letter, she does an amazing job of telling people how special they are to her and why they're special and what's important about them and what makes them different and how other people see them. And I mean, she's spending no money, right? She's just spending time and being very honest. And that to me is an amazing gift. And so those kind of things that are personal, so that we're making something or we're doing something, maybe an act of service for somebody, rather than I'm going to buy you a gift, but maybe I'm going to come the day after the holiday and take your Christmas tree down for you.
Right.
Because that's a chore. I love putting decorations up. Man, I'd pay someone to take them down and put them away. And so maybe that person says, that's my gift to you, is going to be to come and take all that down and put it away.
Right. And I think, there's always but Nana, you always had Christmas and you always had the tree and you always made these 12 kinds of cookies and your house was decorated and all your lights were up and you fixed the whole dinner and you wrote down what presents went to everybody. And then you gave that list to the moms so the kids could write thank you notes. Nana is 74 years old and she can't do it anymore.
Right.
We're not, but no, we don't want it any differently. Well, things change, and it's important to realize that. And if you're the Nana, you've got to enlighten these folks that you can't do everything you used to do. So divvying up what gets done by who, I think can be light bulb for everybody else. Oh yeah, that's right. You did do all that.
Mhm.
One of the things, we just have a minute left here. One of the things that kind of in summary that I've heard a lot is planning ahead,
Mhm.
right? So being thoughtful about what do I want for this or that or holiday or these gatherings or our time together. So what am I looking for in those bonding moments? How am I going to handle the challenges, and how am I going to communicate through all of those challenges? So I've heard a lot of planning being the recommendations. Are there any parting thoughts that you have for people who might be listening about what you think this season might mean for them or could mean for them?
I think the word balance comes into play, because there's so many expectations, work and work parties and church activities and your kids' activities and different family gatherings. It's established a good boundary to choose some of those activities to miss.
Well said, Missy.
Very
Well
good.
said.
Jason or Elaine?
Opportunity, since you're having this conversation now and you guys are directly addressing some concerns you have about the holidays that are approaching, it's an opportunity to use this year as a turning point. And if there's anything that you take out of the next couple months that you really like, that you want to try to work on throughout next year, building to 2022 holiday season, great. If things don't necessarily go the way we're hoping they will, well, we've learned something from that. It's still an opportunity. So either way, this can be built on not just for this year, but all the years to come.
Mhm.
And I would just reiterate the communication that we keep stressing, is, the early planning, communicating with each other and sharing the burden. I mean, it's not really a burden, it's actually sharing the celebration, and it's so much nicer when everybody is part of the meal and part of just the family get together, and using that natural support system that you have in the form of family, just to help everybody have a wonderful holiday season and a wonderful new year.
Wonderful. So boundaries, opportunity, communication, planning, sharing. Great recommendations. This has been a wonderful talk. I'm so grateful that we could all come together for this, and grateful that you could share your time. I know that taking time out of your busy schedules is probably challenging, and we're so grateful that you chose to do this for us in the community and everybody listening.
And we would like to keep this ongoing with webinars that maybe that will be helpful for the community on an ongoing basis. And so please come up with your own ideas, share your client needs, your community needs, and I hope we get together again.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, guys.
You,
It was
I'm
good
gonna
seeing
jump in.
everybody.
I think we're gonna do another one December 14th. So we'll have another webinar December 14th. This has been great. I'm, overwhelmed with how great this has been. I think everyone that's listening is gonna get an arsenal of tools that they can use in their conversations and dealing with their own emotions. And I think the greatest part of this is you guys gave people permission to feel the way they feel during the holidays, and that's gonna allow them to grow in that, and hopefully reach out to one of you guys and ask for some help in those conversations.
Good.
This has been great, and I'm excited to share it. I think we'll put it on our website, and we might be able to post it other places, but I think for now it's just going on the website, and we're definitely going to do more. And just a great time having you guys and fun to listen to.
Good.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Nice hanging out with you guys.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to end it, and you guys have a great time, and we'll see you next month, hopefully.
Okay, over and
All right.
out.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.